The President's Trophy winning New York Rangers are back this season with only one goal in mind: finish what they started, get revenge on the Florida Panthers, and bring a championship back to the Big Apple for the first time since '94. From top to bottom, the Rangers look about as good as anybody in the NHL, from the forward core to the defense to the net to behind the bench. So what does this team have to fear on their quest for a Stanley Cup?
I admit it. Last year was rough.
As I mentioned, the New York Rangers were the best team in hockey. They won the President's Trophy last year with a league-high 55 wins and 114 points, one ahead of the Dallas Stars. Even though surprisingly they weren't top 5 in either goals for or goals against on the season, the Rangers found a way to win a lot of close games thanks in large part to their clutch scoring, power play, and Igor Shesterkin just being an absolute beast. That trend continued into the playoffs. In the first round, they faced off against the division rival Washington Capitals, dispatching them with ease in 4 games. In the second round, a little bit of a tougher challenge as the Carolina Hurricanes were everybody's darling and one of the most stout defensive teams in hockey, but the Rangers still managed to get a 3-0 series lead on them, and an advancement to the conference finals seemed inevitable. The Hurricanes made them sweat by winning the next 2 games and seemed to be on track to close out Game 6 at home and force a Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. Unfortunately, we do not live on the funniest timeline, and the Rangers came back, winning the series in 6 games and advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. That set a date against last year's Eastern Conference champions, the Florida Panthers, another incredibly stout defensive team thanks to their impeccable team structure and Sergei Bobrovsky's heroics. As he had been, Igor Shesterkin was the best player in the series for the Rangers, backstopping the team to 2 clutch wins in their first 3 games of the series. However, unlike in the other 2 series, the Rangers' sticks dried up as they were only able to score more than 2 goals in 1 game of that series, eventually falling to the Panthers in 6 games. Peter Laviolette, known for his playoff success in Carolina and Philadelphia, took the New York Rangers back to the Eastern Conference Final in his very first year behind the bench. In year 2, he figures to be on the exact same track. With an old-school, no-nonsense approach that seems to be a perfect match to the veteran core in the New York locker room, Lavi's always been a guy known more for his tactics than his nurturing. He does seem to have taken some steps forward in that regard in New York. Just look at how Alexis Lafreniere blossomed in the playoffs last year. But Lavi probably has his most talented team on paper that he's coached since the Carolina days, and is hoping to ride them to his 2nd Stanley Cup championship.
You're a star, you're on top, somebody bring you some ham. You should kill yourself.
You could say Breadman, you could say Adam Fox, but in truth, this team wouldn't be nearly the powerhouse it is without Igor Shesterkin. A Vezina winner, Shesterkin's actually never posted a save percentage below 91, and only once posted a GAA above 2.6. He is one of the elite goaltenders in the NHL, and next year he's probably going to get paid like it. But make no mistake, if you're trying to find a goaltender in the NHL better and more consistent than Shesty, you're going to be racking your brain a long time, because you can probably count him on one hand.
Oh, this guy again.
But it's not as though Shesty has to do all the heavy lifting on his own. There is a very good team in front of him. Up front, Artemi Panarin headlines that first line for the Rangers, an elite sniper who, surprisingly, last year was his first year scoring 40 or more goals and 100 or more points. But even on his worst day, Panarin is good for 90 points and 30 goals. His centerman, Mika Zibanejad, is maybe just as skilled as Panarin. The only problem with him is consistency in the offensive zone, but make no mistake, his quote-unquote down offensive years are more than made up by his hockey IQ and defensive positioning. Newly acquired Riley Smith figures to be the 3rd on that first line to collect the easiest 70-point season that anybody has ever gotten. On the second line, Vinny Trocheck will be the center between Chris Kreider and the young stud Alexis Lafreniere. Laf is finally beating the bust allegations after a superb playoff performance last year and his first 50-point season from the former #1 overall pick. Better late than never, but Rangers fans have to be expecting that he'll at least match his productivity from last year and hopefully continue to build on it. His opposite wing, Chris Kreider, is a streaky power forward with a great shot who drives most division opponents mad. He's that guy who always seems to score a clutch goal and drive a dagger into your team's heart, but he'll also spend about a third of the year no-showing on the score sheet. While that top 6 is loaded with stars, the bottom 6 is filled with a lot more question marks. On the third line, you have Will Cooley, a strong power forward who literally looks like a baby giraffe on ice skates a lot of times. Phil Hedl coming off a disappointing year that was lost mainly due to injury, which was especially frustrating given he took a big step forward in the 2022-23 season. And then finally, Kaapo Kakko, the former #2 overall pick who's now square in the target sights of New York Rangers fans everywhere as the bust allegations slip off of Lafreniere and onto him. Putting up only 13 goals and 19 points last year, Kakko's a guy whose name is going to be bandied around a lot around the trade deadline as the Rangers make to look upgrades and move off of young talent to do so, although they'll have to play pretty fast and loose with the term talent when negotiating with another team around Kakko. On the fourth line, the Rempire strikes back as Matt Rempe is here to fight people, and That's just about it. He's here to fight people, that's it. He'll be centered by Sam Carrick, who's a 32-year-old career fourth liner with the Ducks last year, so yeah, don't be expecting much out of him. And finally, Johnny Brzezinski, whose only positive attribute appears to be that he has a body temperature in the high 90s. On the back end, it is similarly very top-heavy for the Rangers. Adam Fox is their number one guy, an elite defenseman, one of the 5 or 3 best in the NHL in my opinion. 3 straight 70-point years from a defenseman is just absolutely insane, as is the fact he did not get a single Norris Trophy Finals nod in any of those years. On his opposite side, the worst Lindgren brother in my opinion, a guy that fans always say things like, man, you never notice Ryan Lindgren out there, as if it's some sort of a positive that the guy is basically the defensive equivalent of a Roomba because he doesn't take bad penalties or get caught out of position. On the second pairing, Keandre Miller is doing his very best to convince New York Rangers fans that he's about to be their Drew Doughty for the next 10 years and not their Darnell Nurse. He's particularly keen to make sure that that's known to Rangers fans before he gets inked to his inevitable huge contract extension. He's paired with Captain Jacob Trouba, last year's recipient of the Messier Leadership Award, which I think is fantastic because now nobody can possibly say that the Messier Award is anything more than the Grammys of the hockey world. Despite the fact that the Rangers most desperately want to get rid of this concussion vending machine, Trouba is back for one more year at least to launch himself at opponents like his WWE. On that third pairing, Braden Schneider is actually a legitimate shutdown defenseman and a pretty good one for being on the third pairing. Zach Jones, on the other hand, is a guy that I think they found on the street and agreed to play defense for $200 a night so they could fit under the salary cap. In goal, the aforementioned Shesterkin is leading the way. It doesn't really matter who's his backup unless something terrible happens to him, but if the worst does come to pass, you still have Jonathan Quick back there. Even though he's older than dirt, he managed to have an incredible season behind that Rangers defense last year, so there's basically no hope for the rest of the Metro unless the entire team bus falls off a cliff.
Oh, Brit is in this?
Even though the New York Rangers are anchored with a ton of huge contracts and star players, they still managed to go out and add in the offseason. Not just like around the fringes, they added to their top 6. Riley Smith in a trade with the division rival Pittsburgh Penguins, a really great deal to bolster that top 6. Otherwise, they didn't really make any significant additions other than drafting EJ Emery in the first round of the draft, but it's just rare to see a team like the Rangers get so much better up front, acquiring a high-skilled player, given their cap situation and the assets they had in their inventory.
That's not bad.
I gotta tell you, the Rangers are pretty fucking hateable. It's really hard for me to find somebody on this lineup who I don't openly despise. I already talked about Shesterkin, I at least respect him, but I'll also say, hey, Cabo Caco, rooting for you to have a bounce back year. If Lafreniere can have one, how about one for you and make it impossible for them to trade you at the deadline and maybe lock you up to a longer term deal than you deserve.
The Gambletron 2000 says the winner is Cincinnati by 200 points. Why, you worthless hunk of junk?
I mean, they're the President's Trophy winners, and they got better in the offseason, so what, am I supposed to say that they're going to get worse? Actually, they might get worse, because here's the funny thing. Their underlying analytics last year were pretty damn bad. Like, not mediocre or just not number 1 overall, but like actually bad. Like, they were really carried last year by elite shooting talent and goaltending. Both of those are things that could absolutely fall off this year. Even if those things both happen, Rangers are not missing the playoffs, and once they get there, they're as big a threat as anybody.
Name one time that the Rangers were decent without a superstar goalie carrying the whole team. I'll wait.
Wasting Igor's. Insane playoff runs with no stars showing up.
The Rangers are the Mets to the Islanders' Yankees, completely overshadowed and forgotten. Igor will eventually either request a trade or retire early for back problems due being forced to carry this team. They're nothing without a superstar goalie.
Matt Rempe. Need I say more?